So this is a discussion about the for next loop. So it's different than the do while loop. It has different keywords here, here, and here, as opposed to the do while loop. That's do, while, and loop. The for next loop is for, to, step, and next. Okay, so let's look at an example of this before we look at how he describes it in general. But before we do that, let's just look at one new uh, type of control that we haven't looked at before. And let's just play with that for a moment. So of course we've seen the button before, but we haven't seen this, which is called a list box. It's like a text box. It allows you to put a lot of things in there as a list. So for example, this is an example, and the code would look like, or sorry, the form would look like this. We'd have like, it's a little bit small, isn't it? But so we have a list box and a button, and the list box is just here. Okay, and you can set the parameters, and he tells us how to set the parameters so that it looks kind of the way we want. Okay, so he says set the there's something called integral height, which I think allows it to stretch properly. One of the anchor allows it to stretch properly, and the integral height, you can play with that. You can set it equal to true or false and see what the difference is. And we're going to have a button. He's going to call it go. He's going to anchor it top right. It's going to be up here. And so we're going to have a form like this. So underneath that button, we're going to have this code here. So what is this? So this is the button click. And we're going to define a variable as a string. He calls it my string. Then we have this loop. Starts here as for, as, integer, to, step, and next. Okay, so here's the loop. What we want this to do is we want to, well, let's take a look at what happens inside the loop. Just like in the last loop, we had the while loop, and here we had loop, and we had what was going on was in here. So let's look at this as well. So what are we doing? We have a string, and it says I'm item string, then concatenate, and I, which is a variable. I is defined as a variable here. It's done a little differently than we usually do it. Usually we would have dim I as an integer, but when you're working with the for loop, you don't have to do it that way. You can just say I as integer. So anyway, I is an integer, and we're putting that in here. And then we're concatenating that with this string. So, for example, suppose I was 0, then what would it say? It would say, I'm item 0 in the list. Okay, so what happens is, first I is 0, and it says, I'm item 0 in the list. And then what happens is, basically we go down to here next, and I becomes 1, and then it says, I'm item 1 in the list. And then we go down here to next again and come back up, and I becomes 2, and then it says I'm item 2 in the list, and so on, right? And what we're doing is we're taking the string, each time it was like I'm item 0, I'm item 1, I'm item 2, and we're adding it. So let's actually take a look at this first, because we should see that first. suppose I add another button here and put in there. This is the name of the list box. We called it LST data. And this is the way you add something into the list box. So you just use lstdata.items.add. So I'm going to add this into there. Let's see it. Okay, so that's the way it works. So if you use lst data.item.add and then put some text in there, you'll add text into the list box. Okay, going back to here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do lst.items.add myString. So myString is going to be, first we said it was I'm item 0 in the list, so that's going to be added. And then we can keep adding new things to the list box. And every time we add something to the list box, it goes to a new row in the list box. So what's this going to do? It's going to say I'm item 0 in the list, I'm item 1 in the list, it's going to add each of those to the list box. So that's the power of this for loop. That we could just change this to 40 and it would add 40 of these. We could change it to 50 and it would add 50 of these. But let's just try it with 4. So here's the for loop, and that's what it does. Okay? So again, if you changed it to 40, now it would go from 0 to 40. So what it does is put 0 in first, then 1, then 2, then 3, and so on. Now, if you wanted to, you could starting with 25, and you could do it that way. Okay, so it looks like that. And you could change this to 2. Step 2. And it goes 25, 27, 29, 31. Or you could change it to step 5. Then it goes like that. Okay? And you can also, I think you can make the steps. I don't know if you can do this. Maybe you can't do this. -2. Let's see. No, that doesn't work. But you can do this. Okay? You can do it that way as well. Okay, so this is an example of what's called a for loop. And you have to have, in a for loop, you have to have a counter like this. So you have to give, this is the counter. And so we define a counter, I as integer. And then we say I goes from 20 to 10. And here I have the steps of -2. Okay, and then you say what you want to happen for each possible value of I. So what do I want to happen is I want to take this string, assign it to this variable, and add it to the list box. And so once that's done, it reaches the end, goes back up to the next, goes back up to the top, and it automatically increments. In this case, it decrements, but generally it would increment by, for example, 1. And then it would go down and do this again. When it gets to here, it comes back up and automatically increments I by 1 more. In this case, 1 more. Okay, so this is an example of the for loop. Now, how does it compare with the while loop that we just looked at?